I grew up in a house outside the city with my parents. Strict people, private people. The kind who didn't believe in open doors or open arms. Not for strangers, not for friends, not really for anyone. We never had guests. The walls of that house felt like they were always closing in. The one exception, the only person my parents could tolerate for more than 20 minutes, was my best friend Alec. I'd known him since first grade. He was the kind of guy you called when everything was falling apart, because he'd already been through worse and came out the other side still smiling. While I was sheltered and coddled, Alec had been working since he was 14. His mom drank. He raised himself. And somehow, despite all of it, he had more life experience, more street sense, and more genuine warmth than anyone I'd ever met. I admired him in the way only a 19-year-old who's never really struggled can admire someone who always has. It was Alec who came to me with the plan. He showed up one evening while my parents were at the theater. We had maybe 3 hours alone in the house, which felt like a luxury. No party. We weren't idiots. We just sat and talked. And that's when he laid it out. There was a building on the edge of the city, an old 5-story Soviet-era block that had been condemned. Bad foundation, cracks in the walls, mold. The city had declared it uninhabitable and was planning to tear it down and relocate the tenants to brand new apartments. Permanently. For free. If I bought a unit in that building, cheap, dirt cheap, because who wants a condemned apartment? I'd legally be considered a resident. And when the city relocated everyone, I'd get a new 2-bedroom in a new complex. At 19, I'd own a real apartment without a mortgage. "You're telling me to live in a building that might collapse," I said. "You'd be there less than a month," Alex said. "It won't collapse. And when it's over, you've got a new place." I told him I'd sleep on it. I already knew I was going to say yes. My parents argued, then agreed. My mother caved first, which is how it always went. My father followed, mostly to stop the conversation. The seller was a guy a few years older than us. Pleasant enough, completely indifferent to the place. He'd inherited it from a grandmother he'd never been close to, and he'd had it listed online within 48 hours of getting the keys. You could tell he'd never spent a night there. The price was just under everything I'd saved. I signed the papers without hesitating. Alec and I went to see the unit before moving anything in. 4th floor of a building that smelled like cigarettes and wet concrete and something older underneath both of those. The iron front door was the newest thing in the whole hallway. Someone had installed it recently, a heavy, reinforced thing that stood out against the peeling, graffiti-covered walls like a suit of armor on a scarecrow. Inside was a different story. The wallpaper was bubbling off in long strips. A single bare bulb hung in the entryway, flickering. The kitchen window had a crack running through the lower corner. The large room had a sliding door to a small balcony, an ancient television set, and a couch. The couch where the old woman had died, as we'd been told. We covered it with a sheet and pushed it against the wall. Neither of us was particularly superstitious, but neither of us wanted to sit on it either. Alec helped me haul my stuff up in the afternoon. By early evening he was gone, headed home for dinner. He'd started seeing a girl named Liza, and things were getting serious. I didn't blame him for leaving. I did feel the silence after the door closed, though, heavier than I'd expected. I realized I hadn't bought food. The grocery store was a 10-minute walk. More than that, actually. The building sat apart from the rest of the neighborhood. separated from everything by a stretch of unlit path that felt longer in the dark than it had in the afternoon. By the time I got back, the street lights were on. The night had settled in fast, the way it does in early autumn when the sky just drops without warning. I noticed the silhouette near the entrance before I reached the door. A figure standing still in the half shadow at the edge of the streetlight's reach. "Who are you?" The voice was female, low, and husky from years of cigarettes. "I live here," I said, turning toward her. "Just moved in today." She stepped into the light. A woman in her mid-40s, compact, sharp-eyed. She had the look of someone who'd been pretty once and still had most of it, just weathered. She crushed the cigarette under her heel and extended a hand. "Lyudmila." "Sergey." She wanted to talk, the way people get when they've been alone with their thoughts too long. She told me she'd lived here her entire life and had no intention of leaving regardless of what the city promised. She didn't trust them. She'd seen too many relocation offers end in a shared room in a halfway house. She'd take her chances with the cracks in the wall. Then a second figure appeared from the direction of the street. The way he moved was steady, back straight, practiced military posture, but one leg dragged slightly, and his breathing was labored in the way only old men breathe. Lyudmila introduced him. "This is Boris Anatolyevich, 5th floor." He stepped into the light, white-haired, wide mustache, the face of a man who'd seen real things. I offered my hand. He didn't take it. His eyes were moving, not around the courtyard, not at the building. They were moving like someone doing calculations they didn't want to share out loud. "Don't open the door at night," he said. His voice was flat and certain, not a request, not friendly advice. "What door?" I asked. He didn't answer. He turned and walked upstairs. I stood with Lyudmila for a moment, and we shared the kind of look people share when they both understand something strange just happened, and neither one of them has an explanation. I locked every lock that night. The iron door, the bedroom door. I even slid the little latch on the inside. The kind that looks decorative, but wouldn't stop anything serious. I lay in the dark and told myself the old man was confused, probably harmless. But his voice kept playing back, flat, certain, like he already knew something I hadn't learned yet. I don't know what time I finally fell asleep, but it wasn't early. New place, new sounds, and that old man's warning circling in my head without landing anywhere useful. I drifted off thinking about the apartment I'd eventually get. Clean walls, working fixtures, a kitchen window without a crack in it. Then I was awake. The noise came from directly above me, the 5th floor, Boris's apartment. Something heavy being dragged across the floor. Not quickly, deliberately. A pause, then dragging again, in a different direction. Then footsteps, slow, weighted, the kind you hear through concrete ceilings when someone's pacing. Then something fell, or was thrown. A crash that didn't sound accidental, followed by the sharp burst of glass shattering. I sat up. I grabbed the watch on my nightstand and used the buckle end to knock against the radiator pipe. A sharp, metallic rap that travels through the whole system, every unit. Old building signal, knock it off. The noise stopped. The rest of the night was quiet. I fell back asleep somewhere around 4, when the sky outside started to gray at the edges. In the morning, I ran into Lyudmila near the entrance before heading to class. I asked, as casually as I could manage, about the apartment above mine. She smiled. "Oh, that's Boris Anatolyevich. Don't mind him." Late-stage dementia, she meant without saying it. moving things around in the night, waking himself up. Probably didn't even know he was doing it. I nodded. I went to class. I spent the afternoon at Alex's place, met Liza, and didn't think about any of it for a few good hours. I came home late. Lyudmila was outside again, in her usual spot. Except this time she wasn't smoking. She was staring up at her window. Her face was wrong. Something was wrong with Lyudmila's face. I'd seen her twice, and already I knew what her resting expression looked like. Guarded, but composed. The face of a woman who'd handled plenty. This wasn't that. She was pale. She was staring up at her own window with the expression of someone trying to convince themselves that what they'd just seen wasn't what they'd just seen. Sergei. My name came out shaky. I don't know how to explain this. She told me she'd just gotten home from her shift. She'd been standing out front smoking, not thinking about anything particular. When she glanced up at her window, habit, the kind of thing you do without thinking, and the light was on. Then it went off. Just like that. Like someone was standing at the switch. "Could someone be in there?" she asked. I was carrying a canister of pepper spray in my jacket, something I'd started doing since moving in. Small, practical, not enough to make me actually brave. But it was there. I took her keys and went up. The apartment was locked. I opened it myself, hit the light in the entryway, and started moving room by room. Kitchen, clear. Living room, clear. Bedroom, clear. I checked every corner with the kind of thoroughness you only apply when your hands are shaking. I did not check the bathroom. I didn't think about the bathroom. I yelled down to Lyudmila from her window. She looked up, relieved, and came inside. She offered me tea. I said goodnight and went back to my place. About an hour later, I was in bed with the window open, watching a show on my laptop. When I heard the scream, it was a woman's scream, and it came from inside the building. I was off the bed before I understood what my body was doing. I went to the window first. Nothing in the courtyard, no movement, no one running. Then I heard it again, and this time I knew it was coming from inside the walls, from somewhere above me. Every coherent thought I'd been holding on to unraveled at once. I stood in my room, and my brain started running possibilities the way it does when you're terrified and trying to make the fear rational. Lyudmila. It had to be Lyudmila. But who would hurt her? Did she have a husband? An ex? Was she alone? She seemed alone. And then a thought hit me like cold water. I hadn't checked the bathroom. I'd gone through every room in that apartment with her keys in my hand. Kitchen, living room, bedroom. I'd felt good about it. I'd yelled down to her with confidence. And I had not. Opened the bathroom door. Whatever was in that room, whoever was in that room, I had been one thin door away from it while I stood in her apartment feeling like I'd done something useful. I grabbed my phone, ducked behind the curtain to see the entrance from my window, and dialed emergency services. The dispatcher said a unit was on the way. I watched the front of the building from behind the curtain. Nobody came out. Nobody went in. 10 minutes later, police lights cut through the dark below. 3 officers went inside. 1 stayed at the entrance. I waved from my window and gave them her apartment number. They knocked on my door 15 minutes after that. 2 plainclothes detectives sat at the edge of my couch and took down everything I told them. They were thorough, professional. They didn't share anything until they were done collecting. Then they asked me to come to her apartment. Lyudmila was in the bathtub. There was a trail of blood that told the story the way stories like this are told by evidence. Slowly, in the wrong order. It started in the bathroom and moved toward the kitchen, toward the window. She tried to get out. She tried to get to a window where someone might see her, where she could scream loud enough to be heard. She had screamed loud enough, just not soon enough. They couldn't establish cause of death on the scene. No wounds on the body, no signs of blunt trauma. The blood had come from her mouth. Her fingernails, several of them, were broken and shredded, the way they get when someone fights hard against something that doesn't fight back in a way you can hit. The door, the detectives told me, had been locked from the inside when they arrived. They'd had to break it open, which meant either the killer had a key, or they'd left through the window or through the building's shared roof access, a hatch that connected to a back door facing the tree line on the opposite side of the building from my window. I didn't sleep that night. I called Alec. He came. Liza was home at her own place, so there was no reason not to. He showed up with a look on his face that said he thought I was overreacting. And 2 hours later, he didn't think that anymore. We didn't talk about Boris. I figured, what would I say? The upstairs neighbor is an old man who moves furniture in the night. I didn't want them wasting time on him. He could barely climb the stairs. Alex slept on my floor. Or didn't sleep. He told me about it in the morning, grimacing as he worked the stiffness out of his back. "Floor's terrible," he said. "And your upstairs neighbor was doing parkour at 4 in the morning. I could hear him jumping." "That's Boris," I said. "Old guy. Dementia, probably. Just ignore it." "Boris," Alec repeated, like he was testing the name. "So, you've got a dementia case living above you, who is also, apparently, doing jumping exercises in the night, in the same building where a woman just got murdered." He looked at me. "And you called me here without mentioning any of that." "He's an old man. He can barely walk." "Old men have keys," Alex said. I didn't want to hear it. I'd already run the scenario in my head and dismissed it. Boris, shuffling down the stairs in the dark, letting himself into Lyudmila's apartment, hiding in the bathroom until she came home. It was absurd. He wheezed going up one flight. His hands shook when I'd seen them in the light. He'd told me not to open the door at night, which was strange. But it wasn't the statement of someone with a plan. It sounded more like a warning. Alec's words stayed with me all day. I had 2 lectures, finished by early afternoon, and spent the rest of it at home. Restless, flipping between the same 3 apps on my phone, not landing anywhere. That night, the noise came back. Worse. Heavy impacts, not dragging now, but something landing hard again and again. Like someone doing damage to the floor with their feet. Rhythmic, deliberate. It went on for nearly 15 minutes before it stopped. I didn't sleep again. By morning, I'd made a decision. I called the non-emergency line in the morning and asked to speak with whoever was handling the case. The officer who took my call was not particularly warm about the fact that I hadn't mentioned all the building's residents when they'd first interviewed me. He let me know, with the patience of someone who's made the same point many times, that withholding information in an ongoing investigation, even accidentally, wasn't a position anyone should want to be in. He used the word accessory once. I think it was meant to motivate me. I told him about Boris, about the noises, about the warning at the door, about Alec's theory, which I still didn't fully believe but couldn't dismiss anymore. The detective on the other end was quiet for a long moment, then said he'd send someone over. An hour later, 2 officers arrived, and I went up with them. We knocked on Boris's door for a long time, long enough that the detective decided they weren't going to wait. It was a wooden door, older, softer than Lyudmila's, and it came open without much effort. Inside, quiet, neat actually, unexpectedly tidy for an old man who lived alone. Family photographs on the walls, Boris as a young officer, Boris with a wife, children, a whole life arranged in frames. He'd been Navy, it looked like, the kind of person who made his bed in the morning out of habit. The bedroom door was closed. They knocked. Nothing. The detective nodded at his partner, and the door came off its hinges. Boris Anatolyevich was sitting in an armchair in front of a large floor-length mirror. He was wearing the same clothes I'd seen him in 3 nights ago. His head had been shaved, or he'd pulled the hair out himself, a pile of white scattered around the base of the chair. There were shards of glass around his feet from something he'd smashed against the wall. His eyes were open. His eyes were on the reflection of the door in the mirror. On us. He was looking directly at us through the glass. The paramedics were called. So was the medical examiner. They asked me to wait in my apartment. I did, or I tried. Mostly, I stood in my kitchen and looked at nothing. I didn't go to class. I couldn't reach Alec. He wasn't picking up. The building felt like it had swallowed itself. Every sound I heard, I clocked and cataloged until I was sure it was nothing. By evening, I was alone in a way I hadn't been since I was a child and afraid of the dark. Except now the dark was informed by things I'd actually seen. I locked everything. Every window, every door. I fell asleep with the lights on and woke up several hours later without knowing why. That electric, full-body snap of waking that means your nervous system caught something your conscious mind missed. I lay there. Listened. Nothing. Then I went back to sleep. The detective called me the next morning. He told me the results of Boris's autopsy. He told me in the flat, informational tone that medical professionals and law enforcement use when they're delivering something they can't make less awful. Boris Anatolyevich had been dead for at least 3 days. 3 days before we found him. 3 days before the paramedics arrived. 3 days before his apartment was opened. Before any of us looked into that room. He had been dead on the night he told me not to open the door. He had been dead when I heard the noises above my ceiling. I stayed on the phone for a while after the detective stopped talking. I don't remember what either of us said. That night, the 4th night, Alec came back to stay. And this time, he brought context. He'd been with Liza when I couldn't reach him, and I told him everything the detective had said. The color left his face in a way I'd never seen happen to Alec before. He was the kind of person who didn't scare easy. Watching him go quiet and still was its own kind of terrifying. We stayed up late. Around 2 in the morning, we both went to our respective sleeping spots. He was back on the floor because he'd refused the bed on principle and I'd stopped arguing. At 4, the sounds came back. Not dragging this time, not slow pacing. Something was running hard, back and forth across the floor above us, heel first, shaking the ceiling fixture in my room, then jumping, landing with enough impact to dust from the overhead light, then running again. The rhythm of something that had no reason to be patterned and was patterned anyway. I was sitting up before I was fully awake. Alec was already standing. "That's the 5th floor," he said. "I know." "That apartment is sealed." "I know." We stood in my bedroom listening to it. It lasted maybe 8 minutes. Then it stopped. Alec and I didn't speak for a while after that. There's a kind of conversation that happens in silence between two people who've just heard the same impossible thing. And neither one of them is going to be the first to name it. I picked up my phone and called the police. The police came in 15 minutes. 4 of them this time. They went straight to the 5th floor. Alec and I heard them moving around up there. Boots, doors, furniture shifting. It lasted about half an hour. When they came down, one of them told me the apartment was empty, sealed as it had been left. No one inside, no signs of entry. He said it in the tone of a man who doesn't have an explanation and is choosing not to need one. I didn't push it. I packed my laptop, my money, and my passport into a bag while the officer watched. He offered to stay until I left, and I took him up on it. Alec was already by the door with his jacket on, and I've never seen him move that efficiently. I couldn't find my phone. I'd set it down somewhere in the chaos of the night, and my brain was running about 30% capacity. So I used the apartment's landline to call my own number. The old rotary-style phone that I'd never touched since moving in, that sat on the shelf in the hallway like something from a different decade. It rang twice. I found my phone on the bathroom shelf. I grabbed it. We left. Alec and I, plus 3 other friends he'd called, went back the next evening to get the rest of my things. We timed it for daylight. We almost made it. The street lights were just beginning to come on as we approached the building. I made the mistake of looking up at my window out of habit. The light was on for 1 second. Then it wasn't. I don't remember giving the order to leave. I just remember everyone running. I'm at Alec's now. I've been here since that night, and that's where I'm going to stay until the city tears that building down. The official process has already started. The relocation paperwork, the condemnation notices, the timeline. Maybe another few weeks. I threw out my SIM card. New number. The old phone itself I left at the building. I wasn't going back in for it, and I didn't want it. Whatever's in there can have it. I thought that was the end of the physical connection. The last thread. Then I found the missed calls. On my new phone, in the call log. 3 calls from a number I didn't recognize. I almost dismissed them. Then I looked at the area code, the exchange, the format. It was my apartment's landline, the old rotary phone on the hallway shelf, the phone I'd used exactly once to find my own cell. Before I walked out of that building for the last time, the calls came in on the day after I left, all 3 within the same hour. All 3 from a phone in an apartment that was empty, in a building that was supposed to be dying, on a line I never activated, that I'd never given to anyone, that shouldn't have had any reason to call out. I didn't call back. I'm not going to. I've had time to think about it. That's the thing about being somewhere safe. It gives your mind permission to go back. Here's what the police established. Lyudmila was killed by a person or persons unknown who likely exited through the building's roof access and out the back door into the tree line. They had a key, or they were already inside. The investigation is ongoing. Here's what the medical examiner established. Boris Anatolievich died of a cardiac event approximately 72 hours before we found him. His body showed signs consistent with extreme psychological distress in the period immediately preceding death. The hair, the glass, the posture, the expression, whatever he saw or thought he saw, in that mirror in his final hours was not peaceful. He told me not to open the door. He said it on the night he died, and he said it in the voice of someone delivering a warning they knew would not be understood in time. Here's what I can't explain. The sounds, every night, coming from an apartment sealed by police tape, occupied by a dead man, running, jumping, the crash of glass. For 3 nights before we found him, and again after. In an empty room, above an empty building, in a place that should have been silent. Here's what I won't explain. The calls from the landline. I've told myself every version of the rational story. Bad wiring, automatic redial, a glitch in the phone exchange. I've told myself the sounds were pipes, settling concrete, stray animals. I've told myself Boris died peacefully, and the posture was just how rigor mortis found him. I don't believe any of it. I don't know what was in that building. I don't know what Boris was watching in that mirror, or what he was trying to warn me about, or whether Lyudmila would be alive if I had opened that bathroom door, or if she'd be the only one who wasn't. I know I'm not going back. I know I threw the SIM card in a dumpster 2 blocks from Alex's building. I know the landline is still there, in the hallway of an apartment in a condemned building on the edge of the city, sitting on its shelf.